Boxed curriculum can be a really attractive option for a lot of homeschoolers. Today, though, we're going to talk about, is boxed curriculum a good option for your family? Okay? I will not be making any judgments as far as a declarative statement, it's good or it's bad, because it really depends so much on your family's circumstances. Before we dig into the pros and the cons, I want to make sure that we're on the same page as far as the terms. When I use the term boxed curriculum, I'm referring to homeschool curriculum that has everything or almost everything you need. One grade level, like grade 4, here's the grade 4 box. Grade 5, here's the grade 5 box. Examples of programs that are all-inclusive or all-in-one, you might hear it, would be something like Oak Meadow, Sunlight, Hearts of Dakota, I believe is one, Easy Peasy, which is online, so you're not actually getting it all in a box, but it's all done for you. Bookshark, examples of curricula that are almost all done for you, meaning that maybe 1 or 2 subjects is left out, and they may give you some guidance on suggested ones, but it doesn't all come in there. Programs like Torchlight, Build Your Library, Beautiful Feet. Okay. So when I use the term boxed curriculum or all-in-one, I'm referring to all of those kinds. The main pro in my mind, and I think the one that appeals to most people maybe, would be that it's all done for you. That you don't have to make decisions, or you have very few decisions to make. Daily plans are included. All the books and science pieces and such come included. Now, of course, there are going to be ones that have some variation, slight variation, but for the most part, almost everything you need is right there for you. You hop on the website, choose what the next grade is, and you're set. This is a huge appeal. 1, because it's easy. 2, because it's not so overwhelming. I think especially for new homeschoolers, if you don't know where to go and you type in homeschool curriculum, ones like Sunlight are going to pop up first because they've got such a long history of being a great program. So you see it, you find your child's grade, hit purchase, and you're done. That is a huge advantage. Or maybe you are new to homeschooling and you know just a couple people. Well, chances are, at least out of a handful of people, at least one of them is going to use one of the box curricula. That statistically, that just seems to be the case. And so then they say, well, I have Sunlight Level F. Want to use it? Okay, well, sure. And that's what you use. And that's appealing. It's great to have everything laid out for you. You don't have to figure out what you're going to do each day because they've already done it. Another advantage is that 1 year kind of flows to the next. Now, of course, whatever curriculum you use, you're going to have gaps because everyone has to choose, every company is choosing what they're going to cover. So you'll have gaps. But for the most part, they're going to make sure that your student comes out at the end of grade 6 or grade 12, depending on how many grade totals they have, and then they've got the basics are covered. Some of them do a better job than others with this, and yeah, some do a better job than others with this, but for the most part, you're going to come out and with all the basics covered, a well-rounded education. Another advantage is that you can then reuse it for your next kid. So if you have kids every 2 years apart in grades, well, pretty quickly you're going to not have to buy new things except for consumables, because you're going to have all the grade levels. And some programs like Sunlight are specifically developed to have a range of ages. so that if you have kids who are 1 or 2 grades apart, you can use the same program with them at the same time. That is definitely an advantage for families with back-to-back kids because it's less work, frankly. That's why I've grouped my kids so much. That you only have to teach science one time, history one time, etc. So those to me are the 3 main pros. But now what are the cons? Well, I have many of those, frankly, but I've narrowed down my list. And the reason I say that is because for my kids, and this is one of my top pros, is that it's harder to customize or adapt. Generally, it's going to be like, here's your grade 4 books. Well, that's great if your kid is a typical kid. But what if they're advanced in math? Or what if they're really struggling with writing? Then you have mismatched levels. So then what do you do? Or what if you have a kid who does great with math that's a workbook math, but really hates reading a more traditional textbook for history or science, and that's what's in there. Well, then you're either having one that doesn't fit the child, or you're choosing something else, and then that benefit of it being done for you has started to wane. And this is where I ran into a big problem with my daughter back we used Hearts of Dakota when we started to, when she was in kindergarten. Because I liked the idea of having all the plans laid out. I liked that, and that one had some flexibility. They gave you a couple math that they suggested, but you could choose which one. Same with history, there were a couple different options, that kind of thing. So it felt flexible enough to work for us, but it quickly didn't. Let me pause here. If you have been using boxed curriculum and you want to get away from it, but you're not sure how, or you're new to homeschooling and you've been leaning that way because you don't know what else there is, or you're just trying to branch out and explore other possibilities. My next video, I'm going to share kind of how I go about piecing together curriculum for a more eclectic type approach that's customized for each kiddo. So make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss that video. And then to go along with that, it's harder if you know there's an area that your kids are going to be really interested in. For some families, it will be harder to say, okay, let's pause on the history so we can deep dive into this. Or let's pause on progressing science because we need to go back and revisit this, or revisit math. Because then it's like, okay, well, for science we're on this week, and for history we're on this week, and for math we're back on this week. And again, you've lost some of that flexibility, or that convenience of having it all done for you. For me, those would not necessarily be reasons to not use it. But for some families, that really gets hard mentally. I don't know if that's quite the right way to say it, but like you feel like you need to stay on top of things. And so hitting pause when you should be on week 30 in the lesson plan, but you're still on week 25, that can be difficult for some. So if that's your personality, take that into consideration. And the other one that I would say is the biggest con to me is the price. There is a big variation on, depending on the curriculum, but some of these get really pricey. I have heard plenty of people who spend $600, $700, $800 or more a year on boxed curriculum. That is more than I spend for all my kids in a year, minus the outsourced high school classes, because those do get more expensive, but otherwise, like, that's a lot of money. And you're paying for the convenience, absolutely. But is that in your family's budget? For a lot of families, it's not. And I hear so often, especially in our local homeschool groups, which we're a military family, so some of the homeschool groups that I'm in cater to military families, and that often has its own budgetary restrictions. So when I hear people say, well, I can't afford to homeschool, and then you talk to them and you find out that they're looking at something like Sunlight and don't know, or My Father's World, and don't know that there are way cheaper options and ways to homeschool. Well, yeah, if your family, if you have 3 or 4 kids and you're looking at curriculum that's $500 or more a student, that's a big chunk of money. So yes, you're paying for the convenience. And if that is what fits your family's budget and other needs, fantastic. That, that's not a con for you. But for a lot of families, that can be a con. And since boxed curriculum is so prevalent in the homeschool community, it's easy to think that that's all there is if you haven't investigated very far. And this next one I know is a little of a broad sweeping statement, but mostly you're going to find a pretty traditional approach to homeschooling with boxed curriculum. And that makes sense because they need to make it easy to plan, easy to implement, easy to sell in one complete set, right? And all your workbooks that you need, or your worksheets, and then your textbooks, etc., all come together, right? That's easy to do. But if you have kids who don't love sitting at a desk and learning out of a book, what do? How do you adapt it? And then it goes back to adapting things and then losing the advantages of having it planned for you, that sort of thing. And frankly, for me, and this again is just my family, a traditional kind of approach sucked the joy out of our homeschool. I got too far into that a few years ago, and it was adapted. Like, it wasn't completely like a very traditional textbook type approach, but it was definitely leaning that way. It was do these pages of Explode the Code, do these pages of abstract and graphs, do these pages out of Math Mammoth, and it sucked the joy right out of our homeschool. And I've talked a lot about finding that joy again, and a lot of it came because that's where we got. And I know that's not true for all families. Some families thrive on that. Some family situations are such that you need kids who can do that while mom is working from home or whatever. It's not a knock on the approach itself, but kind of it is. Frankly, I'm trying to sugarcoat it more than what. I really don't think that is the best approach when one of the joys of homeschooling is to do things completely different than what you find in a traditional school. And then the last con to me, and it may not be for you, of course, is that it's really hard to find secular curriculum, especially if you want completely secular and not something that calls itself faith-free or neutral. Those are definitely different terms. And if you want something completely secular, there are very few choices out there for boxed curriculum. And yes, you could buy whatever and then leave out the faith parts or whatever, but it gets harder. And then again, it goes back to that you're paying for the convenience of having it all done for you, but you're still having to customize these things. And I've talked about before in another video, and I will try to remember to link it, about Christian or secular. And yes, we are a Christian family, but I don't want curriculum I don't want science curriculum that teaches faith, or math math is not, to me, something that should be Christian or not, and all of that. So I don't use Christian curriculum for the most part. There's been very few things that I've used because I want to make sure that it reflects our faith and not someone else. So if you want something faith-free, completely secular, boxed curriculum is really going to limit what your choices are. And clearly I am biased towards not boxed curriculum, but I tried to be pretty fair in the things. There's no clear-cut answer. It really depends on what's going to work for your family. But those are some thoughts of mine and some things to think about from someone who's been around the homeschool world quite a while now. And again, if you're interested in learning how to put together your own, you want to leave boxed curriculum world, stay tuned for our next video, and I'm going to talk about that.